Welcome. This is Dr. Young-Soo Kim. Today we have Dr. Sichel from Australia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Recently, we know that you have written a book. It's called Bittersweet Profits.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that it became an international sensation, bestseller. So, but also I heard that it's called a different name, All Natural Answer for Diabetes in the States. Is it correct?
That's right, in the States, yeah,
Yeah.
and where they're beginning to publish the book.
What is this book about?
The book is about diabetes,
Yeah.
and not only about diabetes, but also about the politics behind the disease itself.
Conspiracy.
Look, it's kind of a conspiracy, a very exciting story, yes.
Is
And,
that right?
yeah.
By the way, you wrote other books too, right?
I've written about 5 books altogether about
Is that
health and some specific books on, for instance, on childhood disorders,
Is
which
that
I
right?
specialize in.
Is that right?
Yes.
And then I know that you're an editor of a professional journal.
I do edit a journal called the Medifile Report,
Is that right?
which is read by a lot of Australian practitioners. And I've got a copy of it with
is
me
that right?
here.
Yeah.
This is a copy that was about Eliotin, actually,
Oh, I see.
and also had the trial results of the 80-person trial.
Oh, you mentioned the Eliotin, which is the product produced at this company. And then how did you know about Eliotin?
I heard about Eliotin from somebody in Connecticut when I was there in 1999,
Okay.
and they told me about yourself.
Okay.
And I was very interested in this product, which could reverse, apparently, diabetes. I didn't believe it, of course, but I thought I'd come across on the way back to Australia. And
I see.
As you remember, I came up to see you from Los Angeles.
Yeah, it just sounds like yesterday, but it's already 4 years ago.
So 4 years, been busy 4
Yeah.
years, and in that 4 years we've used Eliotin in Australia, and
Did you yourself use it?
I've used it myself and
Okay.
my wife because we find that it helps us generally in our health, and even though we keep ourselves very fit, it's improved that even an edge too, which is quite remarkable.
Oh, I see.
But I am convinced now that it works.
Yeah, and that you must have obviously used on your patients too.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And we had some serious patients we used it on. Initially, one comes to mind. He lives in the state of Victoria.
Yeah.
And he
In Australia.
In Australia, yes. And he had a bag on his stomach.
Yeah.
And it's called peritoneal dialysis, which
Okay.
is a bag which you don't have to go to hospital about.
Yeah.
So it's dialysis, which is a walking about dialysis.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah, yeah.
But the urine was slowing down badly, and he was due to go into hospital.
I see.
So we gave him the Eliotin, and in the first week he phoned me and he said he was very excited. He said, my urine began to flow again.
Oh, I see.
In the first 3 days
Yeah.
of taking the Eliotin. He no longer had to go to hospital. And then we had a little boy with diabetes type 1 who he was what we call a regressive diabetic. He wasn't born with diabetes type 1. He actually developed it after a serious motor vehicle accident.
Right? Yeah.
This young boy, he was on 5 shots a day of insulin, including the rapid-acting shots night and morning. And in the first week of taking Eliotin, as a tea it was then, and in the beginning,
Yeah.
a herbal tea form,
Yeah.
he no longer had to take his rapid-acting insulin, which was a great relief to him because a little boy, imagine having to take these needles 4 or 5 times a day.
Before you mention the next patient's case, I'd like to say that our Eliotin product, even though it helps type 1 patients, this is mainly for type 2 patients, type 2 diabetic patients. But we hear the testimonies of type 1 patients over and over that they could reduce the insulin by 60%, by 40%.
Yes.
But let me say that there was no single case of type 1 diabetes that became completely normal. Let me just say that. Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine that might be so, although it may be interesting to see what happens with a later onset diabetes type 1, which is not genetic necessarily.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's an open possibility here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of my other cases, I just arrived from Australia here, and I'd like to tell you about a man who lives a naughty life with his diet. He doesn't worry too much about his diet. He should do.
Yeah.
He knows better.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, despite that, his sugar levels and his medicine levels have dropped.
Yeah.
And in fact, the doctor's very impressed with that.
Yeah.
because his insulin has dropped from 40 to 20, and his drugs on 2 drugs,
Oh, I see.
metformin and diamicron, he's dropped both of those from 2 to 1 a day
I see.
in just 6 weeks.
Oh,
Even though he hasn't altered his dietary habits, which are bad.
Yeah.
That's very impressive.
I see.
I told him you get much better results if he did the whole thing.
Oh. So what precautions do you think you have to give to the patients when they take L-lutein?
I think that the average, in fact, every diabetic patient monitors himself regularly, some 2 or 3 times a day, and that is the only precaution. They will see their blood sugar level improving, and they will then be able to drop their own normal medication quite naturally.
But that's the precaution they have to take anyhow, whether or not they take L-lutein.
Yes, they have to take that. They have to know how to adjust their medicine rates. Yes, that's right.
Do you see any difficulties or inconvenience in relation to L-lutein?
There were when we first began, when it was a herb tea.
Yeah, at that time. Right.
People had to make their herb tea 3 times a day. And
it was very inconvenient, especially Western people who didn't grow up with this tea-making tradition.
That's right.
But for me, I prefer the tea form because I sprinkle over my salad.
Right.
Yeah.
On the salad, right?
Yeah.
Well, some people have funny tastes.
Well, it tastes good on salad, actually. But right now, I don't have that luxury because we just turned this thing into a capsule form.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, we are thinking of turning it into a breakfast form, too.
Is that right?
You know. And we have tried using it in a breakfast cereal, a low glycemic index, that's a low sugar index cereal, which has got L-lutein through it.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to experiment with that.
Okay, so it's an interesting. So the cereal you mentioned, the name was what?
Well, in Australia we have a company called Uncle Toby's. You see?
Yes.
Uncle Toby's Oats and Uncle Toby's Bars. They're very famous.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd call it Uncle Bob's because
is that right?
you're Bob Kim. Uncle Bob's diabetic cereal.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that in the beginning of our interview, you mentioned that there's a certain exciting story. So, do you know something about the history of L-lutein?
Oh, that's really an amazing story. I mean, I've introduced a few products into Australia from overseas.
Yes.
But this is the most, and some of them had an interesting history, but this beats them all.
Yeah.
This history is amazing. It stretches back 17 years, I understand.
Yeah.
And the work that was...
Actually, it's more than 17
even more than 17 years.
Yeah.
And the first result was quite amazing, where a woman was due to have her legs amputated, maybe, and she reversed it. Yeah. And then another woman at the McFarlane Diabetic, a nurse in fact, had a remarkable change around. Yeah. And that, but I suppose the most notable part of this whole history is the offer made by the big pharmaceutical company Roche Lambert of $20 million upfront, you know.
But we declined
it because we, of course, you would have suspected their motives. Yeah. Let me say a little bit more about that. The people listening to this may be a bit amazed about that statement, but